So hi everybody, welcome to this week's visiting speaker talk, who I think many of you know, Andi Dakin, will be speaking to you about his practice. There is a talk next week as well. It's going to be Chloe Steele, who is a fine artist whose practice mainly is around painting. So I'll do it, Andy.
Cheers. What I want to do with the talk is give you a bit of an insight into the way that I think and the way that I approach my making of art. And I do work across a whole range of different media. And my work is very much ideas-led. However, I do get a bit seduced by process. And what I'd like to do is just go through the slides with you, talking. Sometimes what I'm saying doesn't quite connect with the slides, but I'll try and reference where an image comes up that I feel has got a really poignant example within it as to how that idea started or how the work was born. Then I shall share that with you. I want it to stay fairly informal, so if any of you, as I'm talking my way through the work that I've produced, have any questions at any time, then just shout them out rather than wait till the end, because quite often the response to a question is much more appropriate if it's in the context of the dialogue that's ongoing. So rather than wait till the end, if you have any questions, just ask up front, please. Right. In my work, I think I respond to, I really enjoy using colour, I really enjoy the sense of potential for movement, and most of my work is underpinned with humour. And I was saying that one of the things I like responding to is the quality of materials, and if you roll a lump of clay out, I like the way that when you put it on something it just flops down, it kind of settles. It gets into a relaxed state. And my first image is a piece of clay that did this. If you could have the lights off, please. And this is called a wound down clockwork pig. Sit here, I can look at you all as well. Yeah, my work is going back, as the opening slide said, 30 odd years. So there's quite a lot of images here, and I shall just keep rolling on through. So this is wound down clockwork pig. This is a pair of tourist roller skates meeting the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards. This is a pair of Wellington boot buses, and the socks inside have got the faces embroidered on them. They're looking out through the windows of the bus. This is a giant toddler's shoe, which is about 3 feet by 2 feet. This is a pair of kissing mittens. I like the way that the hands are holding, but also because of the embroidery, they're actually kissing as well. When I was in Edinburgh, there was a shop that sold fantastic haggis, and they reckoned they sold the best black puddings as well. And I come from Lancashire, and there's Bury black puddings there, and they really are the best. And this is a transporter for some mummified black puddings. There were some mice infestations, and we caught a few of the mice. And rather than just chucking them in the dustbin, I thought I'd use them as an excuse to make a bit of sculpture. So I made these coffins, and I put the mice in the coffins, and then I fired the coffins so the mice got cremated. And so there's this fine skeletal remains that stays inside the ceramic vessel. And then the lids go on, because they were made out of a solid lump and they were hollowed out, and the lids fit back on perfectly. And then the sarcophagi with the lids on, there they are with the lids on. And these three dead mice go into this pyramid. And the pyramid is flanked by these guardian sphinx mice. And and on the slabs around, the sand is sitting on some other big tablets of clay. And there's a tale on each of these tablets, how each of the mice met their end. So it's a kind of epitaph to 3 dead mice. The starting point for that was a dead mouse. This is called a boinger, and the idea is it's self-sexing. If it jumps up and down, the male part penetrates the cavity within the seed head at the top, and the fertilised seeds get dispersed through the release tubes on the top. There's a close-up of it. Working with clay was a really important medium for me for quite some time. This is another part clay sculpture. I do like the way that different materials, when they come together, celebrate the best of each other. And this one is called It Must Be a Camel. And I think the starting point for this was that I had some bristles and I wanted to use them in something. So it started off with I carved that piece of wood, drilled holes in it, set the bristles in, and then I made this ceramic thing to unify it, and it just looks a little bit camelish. So it became It Must Be a Camel. So the beginnings of this was something quite arbitrary, like some bristles I had that I really liked. I like bristles because they extend the surface of an object. They give an object increased volume, a bit like when a cat puts its fur up. It looks like a bigger creature. And this kind of sculptural enhancement, I think, works pretty well for making forms have a different kind of spiritedness. I had a friend a very senior friend at the time as well, who had this pool cue that was a really rubbish, bent, gnarled thing, and he called it his cudgel. And I made this sculpture that was based on his pool cue cudgel. I do like modern form. I consider myself very much to be a modernist kind of artist, and my inspiration and my love is seated very much within the tradition of modern rather than postmodern, which I despise actually. That's something that I think we could have a great debate on at some stage. However, this is the cudgel, and it's formed very much with that fondness to a modern sort of aesthetic. And the only bit of colour on this, even though I like colour, is he lent me his piece of chalk, which he didn't used to let anybody chalk their cues with, and he lent me his piece of chalk so I could just put a little bit of a chalked tip on the end of this cudgel. Found a piece of wood that was a lump of tree, and it reminded me of something that you might see in a butcher's window. It had that like carcass with bits sticking out. It looked really meaty, and so I amplified that meaty quality and made it into this, which looks like a joint of meat, and it's called This Little Piggy Went to Market. And the sticks are a bit like the twiglet things that you might have at a party, and those bristles again, which I'm incorporating into here, are a little bit like the things that you stick on the end of a chicken if you're having a banquet. Another view of This Little Piggy Went to Market. I saw a programme on the television. It was a wildlife programme, and it was one about the mating of the great whale. And when I was watching, I was really impressed at this whale that rolled over on the surface of the water. And as he rolled over, his penis went up in the air and went splosh. And I thought, well, that's an incredible sight, this massive great thing just sticking out of the water. It wasn't quite this shape, it was slightly fatter at the top, but with creative license I made it this shape because it felt much more like the way this penis was behaving. And I had this in an exhibition, and somebody came up to me and said, I saw that programme, it was amazing, yeah. He said, but why have you done it in grey? Because it wasn't grey, it was that really vibrant pink, wasn't it? And I remembered at the time I was watching it on a really cranky old telly, and it was black and white, and I'd missed, because my work is very driven by colour, I'd missed that fantastic colour opportunity to embrace in my work. So I ended up making a second version in response, and this is called Moby Dick and his friend having boyish fun at the start of the mating season. And the paddling pool has water in it, and when great whales are mating, the males swim around in pairs, and one of the males stabilises the female while the other one serves her. So these two males friskily hunting for a likely female with their tackle ready charged. They're swimming in the water and they're just doing a little bit of target practice. And my mischievous vision is that these lifebelt things are floating on the surface of the water, and these whales are just trying to skewer these, a bit like a fairground kind of game. So, and their context is a paddling pool because they're too big to fit in an art gallery, really, real whales. I found this piece of metal here, and straight away I thought, gosh, that's just like the head of some kind of creature thing. And because at the art college, well, at this art college, we used to scavenge for lumps of metal from the shipyards where they cut different bits of metal and there'd be scraps left over and we'd salvage them. And this was a lump that we salvaged. Because it reminded me of some kind of creature, I thought I'll use that, I'll make a creature from that. And so I got this piece of wood here, this lump of tree, and the tree wasn't bent, so I chopped it into sections and removed little wedge-shaped bits and then unified that, so I had this curved neck, so that the neck of the head shape elegantly went into the form of the body and down to the legs, and varnished it and thought needed to have some colour. And I've always been a fan of Smarties. I love them because of the shape, the size and their colour range, and so this became the greater spotted Smartie eater. And it was also in brackets with a dislike for pink Smarties, because I could mix the other colours of the Smarties really well, but I couldn't mix the pink out of the range of Humbrol enamels that I was working with. So I had to leave the pink ones in the jar so that he didn't have any pink pigmentation on his body, and all the pink was still in the jar. Hence the dislike for pink Smarties. This was an exhibition I had in Hull, and it was called The River Policeman and Other Friends. I do drawings and paintings as well as sculpture, but my sculpture is this kind of eclectic way of unifying ingredients that don't really belong with each other, and when they come together they as a whole make a statement. And the centrepiece there is the River Policeman. That's another one of him. Again, ceramic features in there. And the eyes and the mouth, the bits of plasticine that have been cast into clear resin. It's a close-up of the head. This is a river policeman on beacon duty. That's a cold swimmer. That's a snorkeler. And the snorkeler looks just like the friend who it was based on. These characters that I've got here were based on friends that I had at the time. This is a young man with rampant acne. It's an attempt at trying to be a little bit clever in a way. I wanted to make the image burst out of the frame. So the frame became a bit insignificant really, but it's still a framed work. And this was called a sucker-footed jumper. This is a river policeman in full uniform. This is a bit of a favourite bit of work. After I did that, the head of the animal with the body coming off it, the Smartie eater one, I've been collecting gardening tools, and you can see hoes and gardening forks and plungers and other little hand forks, and I'd attach these to long bits of dowel that I've cut, and I'd remove sections of the dowel so I could make the dowel not be a long straight length, but make it swerve and articulate really. And this is called Saturday Night Party down the tool shed. And the starting point for this was this collection of tools, because I used to go to auctions and buy tools at the auctions, and this was a stock that I've been building up, and I was waiting for the right thing to come along and use it for. And I thought, well, one of the enchanting stories that I can recall from my childhood is an Enid Blyton one about all the toys in the nursery coming to life when everybody had gone to bed. And I thought this would be great if the tool part, if the tool shed ingredients or things in the tool shed all came to life and had a party when the gardener had gone to bed. How would that look? And this is them like all dressed up having their party. And they're partying on a ladder because there's not much space in a tool shed, but it gives them that kind of a vehicle for expression. Like if you go wild at a party, you start dancing on a table. This is called Blind Dog Barking Up a Beacon Tree. And the starting point for this, again, was a big lump of metal. It was two lumps of metal. There's this one and that one there. And I did like the way that when those two bits of metal came together, there was this kind of circular relationship of space that was going on in between them. And I wanted to make it into something else. And because this one had a kind of dog spiritedness to it, I amplified that by making the head and welding a bit on and giving it a tail. And then dogs have a great relationship with trees. And I didn't want to put an eye in the dog, so it seemed good that the tree had a beacon on that the dog would miss. This was a sculpture called Hybrid Sledger. It started off, I made a sledge for one of my children, and it didn't snow, so that I'll use it to as part of a sculpture. So cut these feet out and got some exhaust hose from a venting system and unified the feet. So the idea behind this is that if the thing wants to get going, it just scoots along like you would on a skateboard, and it's trimmed down to its bare essentials. It doesn't have anything else other than this flexible limb that can generate the power to move the sledge. And I was quite pleased with this as an image, as an idea, as something that was self-contained that worked well. And so I'll have a go at making some others, and so I made these. And these were miniature versions of the same thing. And somebody said, you could make a fortune out of those because they'd really sell. So I started going into production. I made loads of them, and I took them around a few craft shops and places, and nobody wanted them at all. So I ended up making lots of other sculptures, and I gave them away. And this was using up some of them. And this is called 7 Hybrid Sledges Crossing a Bath Towel. So just using them in all kinds of random sort of contexts. Things that cleaning people use to keep on top of buildings. I think when you work in a big building, public building, you end up having relationships with the cleaning staff. And this is a portrait of a cleaner. It's called Fear of Dirt in a Cleaning Job. And this is another cleaner portrait, and this is called The Dancing Daily. Somebody I knew wanted to have some ducks like Hilda Ogden out of Coronation Street. So I cast quite a lot of ducks, and I needed something to justify the ducks being made, because just a line of ducks wasn't enough. So I made this, which is a brush-tailed duck catcher, and I found the piece of wood that looked a bit like the head of an animal type thing, and I had loads and loads of teeth from a friend who used to work in a dentist laboratory, and so I started using the teeth on sculpture as well, again using enamel paint to embellish and make the sculpture bright and lively. And so nothing's actually been made here, everything's brought together again. It's just been embellished. The eye is the door off the handle off a cupboard door. Again, the bristles, which I've got a fantastic fondness for, keep appearing. And this is a close-up of one of the ducks. A duck drawing. I still had loads of teeth, and I made this one here, which is called a spider catcher. And these are those giant spiders you get from novelty shops, and some bits of wood that have been joined together, lots of those teeth from the dentist. I found a ladder in a giant swampy bit of land, and it was a pole ladder. It looked really wet, and it had it looked like some kind of an animal in a swamp. And I thought, that's really interesting. If I get that ladder and I do with that what I've been doing with those curly sticks from the Saturday night party down the tool shed, I can make this ladder go through some kind of motion. So it'd be like a combination of snakes and ladders type thing. And I painted it as well. And this is the ladder in an exhibition I had at a gatehouse in Worksop. There's an art gallery there, and so the pattern on the ladder was based on a pattern of a python that I saw in a book. It's not a really accurate copy of the python, but it's taken the colours and the structural markings that this python had. One of my favourite films of all time is Mary Poppins, and this is called Bert's Magic Firework, and it's inspired by that scene where Bert and his chimney sweep mates are all dancing on the rooftops, and then the Admiral, who lives a few doors down from Jane and Michael, is setting off lots of rockets from the roof of his house. And I made several of these fireworks, and when I was doing exhibitions, either my own exhibitions or with Kingston Art Group, for about a year or 2 years, I would bring these out, or I'd add an extra one to it. So I have 3 or 4 of these full-length chimney sweep brooms with an embellished head, all fizzing with colour, and they would be snaking around the room, and I'd look for places where it could come out and then head towards, and it would, as if the firework was trapped in the space and it was whizzing round. Again, that kind of dynamic of the way that something can occupy space in a meaningful way was an aspect I was really exploring with these sweep brooms. This work here has got every chance of being my best ever work. Again, it's just things that exist already that I've brought together, and see the sink plungers and those red-headed brooms. And this was just a shelf that I found in a skip from a shop that was being refitted, and it's called Redheads Doing the Conga. And there's a real sense of movement in the way the feet are poised, and it's using gravity to keep it in place because the way that the shelf is being upturned. And I thought, great, I've done something here that's really working well. It relates to the space very purposefully, but I couldn't resist the temptation to just do something to treat the surface, so I put my dots on it again, and I think it has actually improved the work. The last shot was in my studio, and this now is in an art gallery, and the dots do make the top parts connect more purposefully with the boardwalk that they're dancing along on. I used to be a technician in art college, and one of the things that we'd do was get the students to cut out a push stick. This was so that when they were using the bandsaw, it meant they didn't get their fingers near the blade. They could just push their job through with a shaped stick. And we generated loads and loads of these, and there was far more than we'd ever use as a team. So I thought I'd use some in sculpture. So that's the shape of the stick there, and I painted them to look a bit like fish. And when I went to Pitlochry, there's a hydroelectric dam system there, and they had to take away the way that the river normally fell down the mountainside, and they built in this thing called a fish ladder. And the fish then, it was a salmon leap, but the salmon didn't actually leap, they just swam up between chambers that were made at different heights up the gradient of the hill when they were swimming back to their spawning ground. And so they would just swim up and then swim up and swim up. And when I went there, I was looking forward to seeing these mighty fish swimming back to their spawning ground from the ocean after having loads of time at sea, hungry to lay their eggs and become the founders of the next generation. And it was really disappointing seeing them just swimming up into these little lodges. So in response to that, this is what I made and it's the fish ladder. And it starts off in again, it's a paddling pool. It's got a bit of water in it to make it feel real. And the fish are just on these extended springs. And because of the filaments that are sticking out of them, as people walk by, they generate a little bit of a breeze, and they do sway. They kind of move in the ambient draft of people in a room. So swimming up, they're leaping up this ladder, and then at the top you can just about see there's a set of windows that the fish is jumping through, and then you've got the fish swimming along in that set of windows as well. And so whenever I displayed this in an exhibition, I did try and find a venue or a location where that extra piece could happen. And normally it did lean up against a window and they were jumping through an open window. A burning fish. This one, I'm quite pleased with the way this evolved as well. I found these box things in a skip. They were being chucked out from the woodworking part next door in the tech college, and they used to have tools stuck in them, but they'd changed and they got some more kind of modern approach to storing tools. So these were all in the skip, and I got them out, and I thought straight away they've got that kind of animal connection, look a bit like dogs. So I did that, and I thought, well, I'll do that other thing I've been doing with my other work, where I chop it up and I give it a sense of movement. And this is one of those boxes that's just bending around a corner. His tail's on one side and his head's on the other side. Again, just using, the only bit I've done is refashioned the body and painted it. The other things are all found and assembled. And this is the pack of dogs just having a little bit of a play together, yapping away. And another one just jumping out that window that I used for that other sculpture before. Again, this is in my studio. I had an exhibition at Scarborough, and I wanted to use the dogs, but I didn't just want them messing about. I wanted to do something purposeful with them. And I've been working with ladders, and so I thought, right, I'll make a wave out of some ladders and I'll have the dogs surfing. So these are the dogs surfing on improvised surfboards. And you can see there was an ironing board, a tea tray, a cricket bat at the bottom. There's an ironing board there. And these ladders, I did that chop up and make them so that they ended up doing that kind of S-shaped thing, like the side profile of a wave. And by stacking them together, I could make them sweep along and hit the wall. The gallery at Scarborough is split up into several rooms. And I wanted the rooms to be unified, other than you just go through the door, see some work, go through the other. I wanted the work to be featured in both rooms. So this wave crashes against the wall in one gallery, and then in the other gallery, the surfing dogs just shoot through the wall. So they pass through the solid masonry of a building wall, and that's one that's already done that journey through the wall. There's a gallery in Heckington called the P-Room Gallery, and they invited me to make some sculpture that was part of a festival of play. We thought my work was kind of in the right zone for that. And so I made this, I made a couple of these, and this is just, again, it's using things that I found, and this is a saw trestle that a builder would put planks on, saw bits off them. And the bit at the top is two bits of wood that are hinged, and the top part here has a flexible, dangly bit of wood on it, and that rests on the bottom. And just behind where the wood rests, there's a hole, so the wood can drop down through the hole. The top jaw is really quite heavy, so the idea was there was a basket full of soft toys, and you could throw the soft toy, and if you knocked this stick, it went back, and the jaw shut to on the soft toy. And that was the monkey, and that's the other dog with Postman Pat. And it did work quite well. A lot of families really got into playing with this. Another pole ladder that I've chopped up, and I've made it become like a giant hairy caterpillar. And so you can only fit so many things like this in a van. and I thought my sculpture is getting too impractical. I've got to work out a practical way of using these things. I still wanted to use ladders, so that if I just cut the ladder and I keep it flat, then it gives me the scope to be able to use the ladder in a modular installation kind of way, and the work can change according to whichever venue I go to. So I made lots of these ladders that I've cut into these like re-articulations from the straightforward steps of a ladder position. And this is then lying on the floor in the studio. We went to Scunthorpe Museum and Scunthorpe Art Gallery, and the museum and art gallery wanted us to make the two spaces become one, to double their talent. Because when people go into a museum, they can make a clicker, but if they go into the museum and then they go into the art gallery, they can click again. So it's like two visits for the stroke of one. And this was a sculpture designed to get that multi-visit habit going within the visiting community. So it started off in the museum, in the courtyard there, rose up, went through the wall, and then through the wall into the art gallery. This was the same work going to Scarborough, a variation of it, and again using that notion of Scarborough having those different rooms upstairs. This went up over the balcony walk around bit, through the wall into the art gallery room on the other side. I got asked to do a public sculpture, and it was working with some kids that were in a secure, supportive environment, and it was in the fruit market part of town, and it was called the fruit ladder, the thing that we made. And again, it was using the ladder and working it, and it bent round the corner, and all the kids made some drawings of fruit, and we cut out this out of steel, and then we bracketed the steel to the ladder. And the ladder's connected to the wall using brackets, but camouflaged by those suckers on the plungers. And when you stand underneath it, some of the suckers are touching the wall and some are off the wall. So it actually looks like the thing is literally climbing up and round the wall. It was quite an effect, a good visual effect that went with the sculpture, a great illusion of movement. The old studio space I was belonging to, we had a really good high ceiling, and we were all tending to work very low down. And when we opened our studios every year and had a big exhibition, and I was wanting to use that roof space. And again, the modular flexibility of single units of ladder meant that I could do all kinds of things in different contexts. And this was one that I did in the roof of the studio. And with strong light shining on it, it got great shadow effects as well. So it really made very positive use of that space at the top. And I do like working with light. Light is quite an important thing for me, and I often work in galleries that have got subdued lighting. Again, some more of those ladders. This is called rutting steps. You'll notice on the steps there are some little bobbly things, and these are objects that I really like using. They're the things you put on your finger if you're counting money, or office people use them. Just stops you getting blisters on your finger. It's a show I had in the Ferrens Art Gallery, in one of those octagonal galleries. Again, it was a time when I was working with the ladders and using the ladders on the walls as a motif to generate these large drawings. As well as using them in the space to make sculpture that connected well with the space. And this is, again, this is a collection of things that have been put together. It fizzes really well, and because it's got those little fingery things on its feet, it looks like it could scuttle along quite nicely. This is another bit of a favourite here. One of the ladders is bent over so it looks like it's doing the crab, and this ladder's bent in such a way it looks like it's doing the handstand. And it's like a pair of acrobats, and that works well. It's quite delicately balanced, but it didn't get knocked over for the duration of the show. And I've had that in a few different exhibition contexts, and it always seems to hold its own really well. That's a closer, a bit of a better shot of it. Took the same lot of ladders down. We had a group show in Bristol, and then somebody invited us to go and do an exhibition in this amazing modernist house and grounds. And they had a tennis court, so I said, right, I'll do something with the tennis court. And so these are ladders leaping out of the bushes, attached to the wire of the tennis court. So it looks like they're moving in space, because you don't notice the wire straight away, especially if you're looking at it and you don't imagine there's a tennis court there. That's it in a slightly grander context, the like relationship between the ladders and the bench underneath these lovely bushes here, and there's trees. And the ladders, I kept the colour of the ladders so that they bore witness to their previous role. And some of them had patina on like decorators, others were just worn down because they'd been in a library or something. And each of them had their own little tale to tell. And I didn't want to destroy them, rob the ladders of that, so I didn't do any painting on these ladders. I kept them clean. And that truth to their origin made them become much more harmonising with the context of this ground. And there's another one here that I did, a very long one, that was a kind of menacing serpentine thing that did look much more threatening, and that was like crawling along, and that was like heading towards these, which are quite like little dancing, jumping bunnies or sprites or something, that menacing thing heading towards them. So a bit of drama there. A straightforward ladder with lots of coloured ping pong balls. I managed to find a load of ping pong balls, and so I just did that with them. A really simple statement, but it worked really well. It was quite an effective, quite an effective thing. And these are scouring pads. Coloured scouring pads you can get from places, and I did like the layering of that empathised with the layering of the steps. Do that quite a lot with my work, just try things out, see where it could head, bring bits of ingredients together to see what they can generate just through being themselves in the company of other things. This is a bit like that. These are tickling sticks. I like Ken Dodd. And these were like homage to Ken, really. I'm not really sure what this work's about. This is one of those doodly things that ended up getting out of hand, and it became quite a big sculptural installation. And it was just filled with little things that you could explore visually and tactilely. And there's little bits of enigma in it. I still don't know what it is. But I think it's sometimes all right to do that. Do something that you haven't got a clue what it is you're doing. And you can sometimes get away with it. And if you get away with it, you could probably exhibit it. If you don't get away with it, then the experience of trying something new out is there to feed into all your other, from that moment onwards, decisions. But it's things that I've collected that had a bit of an empathy that could work well with each other. This is an altar. I did quite a lot of work that was entitled Altar. And I think in your life there are things that come along that test you emotionally. And this was a response to one of those emotional testing occasions. This is Altar again. Quite a few of these were made out of materials that I enjoyed working with. So this is an old fireman's ladder chopped in half. And if you go on a skiing accident now, they don't put plaster of Paris on your broken limbs. They use this very brightly coloured stuff they add with water, and it's a bit more like a resin kind of compound, and it comes ready coloured. So that dictated the colour scheme for these works. This is on a boat in Goole, floating art gallery. this is another exhibition in the Floating Art Gallery, a collaboration between Jeff Keane and myself, and he was doing paintings on blinds that have that Harlequin-esque feel to it. They're a bit like a carnival or a kind of medieval fiesta sort of spirit to them. And I had this frame of an old tent that used to be the family tent, and I just did things with the tent frame, substituted for other things I had in the studio, and we made a duet. I was using the space in the place, and he was surrounding my work with his paintings, and it did work really well. The two were bouncing off each other, and it was quite like a medieval tumbling carnival. So the sculpture wasn't designed, it just sort of evolved in the context of the space it was being presented in. And the kind of squiggles and geometric forms that Jeff had in his paintings connected really well with the kind of the shapes I was exploring in my sculpture. And the squiggles, like these, became quite a big feature of mine. And if you go to a seaside area, quite often in the, well, these are from Spurn, and Spurn was a potential landing site for enemy invading troops. So they used to stick great big springs in the sand and barbed wire, link them all together to stop the enemy or to slow them down if they did have a landing, so that the people with the guns, who were the goodies, could just pick them off before they got onto the shore and were a threat to our nation. And that tends to, I use these a lot in the sculpture. Again, gardening tools there, brooms, golf tees. They're such a lovely object, and I just like them. So I bought loads and loads of them and used them, studied things with them. These are those springs again. Again, just a messing about thing in the studio, trying something out, seeing how I could use them to do a drawing, what the drawing would turn out like without twisting the springs in a different way. Shot of the studio, because we used to have open studios where people could come and visit, so there's an excuse to tidy up and present your work a bit. Again, that's an organised rack of bits that might find their way into a sculpture. This is one of those where a few nice objects come together and make something. Nothing's been done there, just different things. It looks like a delightful piece of confectionery, like something made out of meringue. I cast quite a lot of butternut squashes, and the two halves of the mould, then covered them with crushed stone, and they had this kind of look like geodes, a lump of rock with crystals inside, and so that they opened up and there were little bits of treasure inside them. Doing a lot of work that was inspired by microscopic life forms or subaquatic life forms, and just the movement that they have and the colour that they have and the texture that they have all were really feeding into the things that I like to explore. So I spent quite a few times down at the Deep, and the inspiration behind this body of work was a party I went to at the Deep, and it was at night time, and you see the creatures in the tanks become so much more animated during the hours of darkness, because most of them are nocturnal, and it was such a different kind of experience, and it set me off on a trail of wanting to explore some of that magic that they had, that I was witnessing when I went there, and they treated me to their dance, really. Good excuse to use colour. Again, that relationship between different forms or different blobby shapes. I enjoy the process of etching as well as sculpture and painting. I think most of the work that I'm involved with now is etching, but I still enjoy dipping into a lot of other areas. And where I can, I like to do nothing. And this is a nothing. I've found this, and it connected so well with what I was trying to describe. It felt like it was a self-resolved find. So I'm claiming it as mine, even though I can't really claim it as mine. It's just a lovely object. A collection of things put together. Other of those paintings. A different studio. There's a studio in the house with work that I had ongoing. I like watercolour, and I like the way that watercolour behaves. You can drop a bit of pigment in the wetness, and it spreads. And that is just that motion, that action of the pigment dissolving and spreading through the water. It's very like the behaviour of some of the creatures that were in the deep, but also it's very like the behaviour of light. I had an exhibition in Malton, and the art gallery had a feature, and it had a ceiling rose, and the ceiling rose lit from inside. It wasn't just a rose that was a piece of plaster on the ceiling, it had lights inside the plaster, and it was contemporary with the building, so it was like early Victorian, this feature of this room. And whenever I have an exhibition in an art gallery, I like to make a work that relates to the gallery, like the surfing dogs at Scarborough. And for this one here, I wanted to make something that connected with the gallery, so I made a rose that went on the floor underneath the ceiling rose. And so this like collection of blobby forms were around this light, and it stood underneath the ceiling rose. It worked well. It satisfied my my doing something in response to the art gallery needs. When I was doing the photographs of this as a sculpture, I took this photograph and I detached my mind from the fact it was something happening on the floor, and I imagined what would it be if that was like a planet and we weren't actually on Earth, we were in somewhere else looking through a window, or if that's the window of Bilbo Baggins in his house and he's just looking out at it. It's got that kind of intrigue, and it makes the notion of space become a little bit comically mysterious, enchanting in a way. And I started doing these paintings, which were watercolours, where it was like looking through a hole at some light in the distance. And that set me off on these other things, and I suddenly came, these are all like eclipses where you have the corona just breaking through behind the planet that's in front of the star. The sculpture was getting a bit like that kind of thing, a combination of things that might be underwater or microscopic, but also a bit like something that might travel in space. I've tried to get this sorted out on the Photoshop, and it's got a bit weirdly stretched. It was a smaller image than the box, and I should have sought a little bit of technical advice on that one. So it should be a sphere, that. It is a wooden sphere. It's become a bit distorted. That's how it looked from the camera. Again, that's something that looks like it could fly through the air, but it's also very like a sea urchin. It's just golf tees with a jelly kind of scrubbing brush. This again has got that kind of underwater spirited feel to it. Combinations of glass, stainless steel and plastic. And those are just, I have a friend who has to have injections regularly, and he gave me loads and loads of the ends of his needles. And they make this lovely textural cover, a bit like what I was exploring with the bristles, but a different sort of quality of protruding detail. These again are a bit like urchins, or something that, like a Victorian idea of a space rocket landing somewhere, or things that float in the sea that blow up ships. This is one of those, a couple of things brought together that work just really well. I love the surface of that plastic thing that I found on the beach that's really enigmatic, can't quite tell what it is. And then this here, which is one of those things you put in a tumble dryer to help dry your washing or something. But it's just such a lovely object, and the two fitted snugly together.
About 10 more minutes, Andy. Sorry, just about 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes, right, okay. Yeah. Etchings, again exploring the idea of space. And the top one is a drawing, and the drawing was done by getting a second impression from the etching plate, so there wasn't much ink on the paper, and I'm working into the surface quality of the paper using either a pen and ink or using pencil, and that was an ink one now, and that one's a pencil one at the top, that's a print below it. So that's the pair there, the drawing and the print, the drawing after the print. This is one of my favourite etchings, Deep Space. It connects very well with that notion of the behaviour of single cell life forms or simple life forms underwater, and with things that you see in space, the way that galaxies explode. One of my favourite little bits of things that I found out that excited me about space is that at the centre of our galaxy we've got a black hole, and it's holding the galaxy together, and the centre of every galaxy in the universe is a black hole, keeping that galaxy in its right kind of relationship with each other. And now and again these black holes start to feed on things that get a bit too close to them, and our galaxy's black hole has just eaten some cosmic matter that was 3 times as big as the Earth, and some scientists were able to watch it, which was quite interesting. So that set me off on a bit of a black hole mission, and so these are all fantasies about what the events of a black hole feeding are like. I had an exhibition this summer at a place called Caister in Lincolnshire, and I wanted to do some sculpture there. I said, no, you can't do sculpture, we don't do sculpture here. And so I was doing lots of prints and drawings for the show, and the thing that I really wanted to do in the show was they've got this space in their ceiling that's got lots of holes drilled in it, and this, like, you can look up to the sky through this space, and the drilled holes look so like star constellations or galaxies and bits of the universe. And so I used lots of my finger end things, and I sneaked in there and borrowed a ladder and studied this thing with all these finger bits, and had this chimney, and I did something like 700 or 800 of these finger end things were stuck in there. You can't see it that well, but when you're in the gallery space you can see these little bits of colour protruding from the holes. And I liked that because they said you weren't allowed to do sculpture, and yet there's this massive sculpture in the space. Well, that's another shot of it from a different view in that chimney way. This is black hole holding everything together. Another feeding black hole, another feeding black hole. That was the last etching that I did. I am getting restless and I want to get back into sculpture. Somewhere that I do visit a lot is Spurn, and I went to Spurn just after the first breach, and then just before it became the island that it now is instead of the peninsula, unless in the last couple of weeks that island has been reclaimed and it's now part of a peninsula. I'm pretty sure that Spurn is still an island at the moment. And in the bit that is between the tip of the existing land and the island, I did a sneaky thing, a little bit of archaeological salvage. And when they make new roads on Spurn, a temporary road because the other one's just been washed away, the first move is to shove the sand in the right kind of place, get it fairly even, and then they stood the side of the roads with stakes, and these are the stakes that were the existing boundary of an old road that since got washed away probably about 20 years ago. And they've been re-exposed, and so I nicked these and brought them back, and I'm going to do something with these. This is going to be the start of the new sculpture that I'm going to make. And I've been just having a very tentative play just to show how I mess about with things, to try and work out what I might do with them. And like some old knitting needles I've got in a pile of old knitting needles I've got, and I've just did this, that isn't going to be what it's going to be, it's not going to be anything like that, and it's not going to be the other one, it won't be this. But again, my old faithful things that you put on the end of your finger, those finger cones, those lovely little lots of textured colour, trying them out with it. And so that's where I'm at the moment. That's my a bit of a cram together of the sort of things that I've been exploring as I've been enthused by making things as a creative release. Some of the things get shared through art gallery exhibitions, some of them don't actually leave the studio. And but one thing I do know is that I'm going to carry on doing things one way or the other. And I think as fine artists or as creative individuals, that's something that you've got to do. You've got to, it isn't something you dip in and out of, it's something that is a bit of a calling, and it's a responsibility that you have to yourself. So I would encourage you all to don't switch off, because your best ideas come to you when you don't think you're going to be getting them. And if you've got your receptors just opened up, you'll end up doing tons better things than you will do if you end up becoming a 9 till 5 kind of creative person. Nobody's asked me any questions, have you? Has anybody got any questions, like at the end, after it's all been shared, after I've spilt the beans?
Where do you keep all your stuff you've made? Because you've made so much, it's massive. Where do you keep it?
I've got a studio in town that I can't really use because that's a storage area. One of the reasons why I recycle bits and you find things that come up again in a new work is because that saves me having to throw things away. But now and again things do get jettisoned. A lot of my work is impractical, so it doesn't get sold. And that's one of the reasons why I started doing prints and paintings, because they're much more practical to store, and hopefully I wouldn't have to store them because they're a bit more accessible, they're in portable size, but nobody seems to buy them, so I've still got them, I'm storing them as well. So they're in a different part of my storage system to the sculptures. Any other questions?
I was going to say, with a lot of your earlier object-based stuff, you could think as a viewer of it that it's entirely accidental and self-contained, because something you find and then you deal with that, and then it's off onto the next thing that is accidental and dealt with within that one object. I'm sure that's maybe part of the work, but do you see that there are longer standing things being explored through the work apart from just humour or absurdity? Do you think these things answer long-standing questions, or are they entirely self-contained?
I think they do, really, yes. I think my enthusiasms come from the way that by unifying disparate ingredients, something quite exciting or magical can happen. Like, for instance, the brush heads are really nice objects and the plungers are nice objects, but when you put them together, they become something else. They become a drama that's animated, even though they're static. And I think my long-term ambition is to keep creating, or not create, I don't like the word creating, keep facilitating or making events happen that bring some kind of magic, a second take on something. One of the reasons why I do things that take such a long time as well, those dot paintings, is because if you invest quite a lot of energy into something, that energy stays within the thing, within that zone it's been committed to. And it does give that thing a longevity and a genuine embodiment that's greater than if it would have just been, for me anyway, in my practice, than if it had just been like a throwaway, quite simple, quick and economically generated thing. So the sculpture is like the offset of that in a way. It is bringing things together. There's such a lot of consideration and thinking goes into it, and contemplations and brooding, that I love it when it comes together and it looks like it's just happened. So it's like trying to make things look effortless and trying to make things look amazing. And if it is effortless, then that's brilliant. But I'm not finding I can ever do it effortlessness to get that to get the kind of announcement I want to make does tend to take a lot of man hours and a lot of patient labour, really, as well as deep thinking and gameful speculations. Any other questions?
Do you ever get sick of painting dots? Does it ever get too much?
Not really. I should say yes, but it doesn't actually get, I don't get sick of it, because each time I mix a colour and I put that colour down and I increase the area that colour is covering, it becomes a different sort of thing, and you put another colour on and a new relationship starts, and then the third and fourth colour. And with those paintings, the dot paintings, they start off with a really quick gestural beginning, and the dots reinforce that fresh gesture, so it makes them look quite organic and natural. And the beginning is literally a stick in the paint, the mixed up paint dribbled on. I rehearse it first without the paint on, and then I go for it, deep breath and go for it, and then let it dry and then begin the dots, and the thing starts to come to life. It evolves and it becomes the thing it will eventually be, but I can see the stages of it, and it's the optimism of the final outcome that generates that desire to continue what feels like it should be a boring process. But in that boring process there are so many mini rewards that it justifies the intensity of the activity.
It actually reminded me of visionary paintings I've seen of people done on ayahuasca in the Amazonian rainforest. Shamans they look really similar to that. Actually, the visions they have in those trips.
I think because dots do have quite a spiritual connection. They're such small fragments of information that when they're unified they can become anything. It's just the order that they're put into. So, and I think the whole makeup of nature is from molecules or from little cell sections. So everything's made up of really small components, which is why the dot is such a prevailing motif for image generating. Any other questions? Right, thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Cheers. Right, thanks for attending, everyone, and there is a visiting speaker next week as well.